Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Hana and I'll be hosting today's discussion. I'm a Yonsei from Seattle and I'm a member of the Minidoka Pilgrimage Planning Committee and Janaima's Youth Engagement Committee Nikkei Rising. And I'm so excited to welcome, on behalf of the Minidoka Pilgrimage Planning Committee, Ken Mochizuki to talk about his acclaimed children's book, Baseball Saved Us. Ken is from Seattle, Washington, and he's the author of children's book, Baseball Saved Us, Heroes, and Passage to Freedom, the Sugihara Story. He's also a journalist and historian and is the author and contributor to several adult nonfiction histories. Ken, thank you so much for taking time to be here. It's such an honor.
Well, thank you, Hannah, and Tadaima from my home in suburban Seattle.
So I wanted to start off by giving a little context about how Baseball Saved Us came to be. I know it was really groundbreaking for this history to be represented in a children's book. Can you tell us a little bit about when you decided this was a book you wanted to write and why?
Okay, first of all, I have to give my tribute to the late, great Nisei young readers writer, Yoshiko Uchida. She had the courage to publish her first book in the late 40s, when all things Japanese was still unpopular in this country. And her publisher had the courage to do it also. And she paved the way for everybody else who came after her. For Baseball Saved Us, I'm going to back up about 10 years before then. This is the 1980s. And I'm working for a newspaper called the International Examiner in Seattle. It's the paper for the Asian Pacific American communities. And as a writer and reporter, the redress issue, the redress movement was going on. And this is when Nisei started talking about stories that we never heard before. And one was about the Nisei veteran who refused to step foot on the Puyallup Fairgrounds. And that's where they have the annual Western Washington State Fair. But also during World War II in 1942, it was the site of the Puyallup Assembly Center that all the Japanese Americans were confined at. And so he didn't want to go there for all the bad memories it would bring back. And also when redress was achieved, I heard the story of a Nisei lady who refused to endorse her redress check because that would be like saying everything's okay now. And for her and her family, what they went through, everything will never be okay. And then I read a lot of books that came out about the camps and Japanese American history in general, because I would review them for the newspaper. And I ran across that in the camp, sometimes the camp guards would act as umpires for the baseball games in the camp, or there would the guards in the towers would, because they had the best seat in the house, would cheer on for their favorite team or a favorite player. And that was borne out by an illustration by the great Nisei cartoonist Jack Matsuoka. And so at that time, I was actually being paid to do my research for Baseball Saved Us, but I didn't know that then. And it was in the summer of 1991 that I get a call out of nowhere. And he says he's Philip Lee. He started a multicultural children's book, books with his partner, Tom Lowe. And their whole objective was to fill the void in the children's book world, where all the books about people of color seemed to be fairy tales or folk tales. And they wanted to have more books about people of color or written and illustrated by people of color. And so he asked me, and Philip was canvassing across the country for his first line of books he was going to do. And he said he got my name from his wife, Karen Chin. And then, so he asked me, have you ever done a children's book? I said, no. And he said, have you ever considered writing one? I said, no, not at the time. Because, I don't know, I guess I kind of considered a children's book something minor, you know, because I wanted to do it at that time. but I was still open to it. And so he sent me a fax, that's ancient history now, of a magazine article about playing baseball in the camps. And that article centered on Kenichi Zenimura, who formed baseball teams in the Fresno area, then built the baseball field in Higa. And I won't go into detail about him because there's like a good video on the Tadaima website about that man and what he did. And so Philip asked, you want to do a picture book biography on this man? And I thought, no, I want to do a historical fiction with our protagonist hitting not just one clutch home run, but two in two different situations and for two different reasons. Okay, so then wrote up my first draft. Philip said, it's a go, gave it the green light. And he found an illustrator named Dom Lee. He's from Seoul, South Korea originally, and he was living in New Jersey at that time. And then he was selected because he had done sports illustrations before. So Philip sent me one of his illustrations. It was a boxing scene, and one of the boxers was on the mat for the count, and the other one had his arms up in the air in triumph. And then it looked really bleak, dark. It looked like something out of the movie Raging Bull. And I thought, this guy, he's going to illustrate Baseball Saved Us, but we know the results, right, in the end. So, but it was an interesting process working with Dom because I really didn't. Because Dom would call Philip and say, and can you ask Ken this and this? And then Philip would call me and said, Dom wants to know this and this. And I would call back Philip and said, okay, the answer is this and this. And then he would call Dom. Or Ken said, it's this whole kind of relay system. And I would find out years later that the reason why was because the publisher didn't want me having any kind of communication with Dom because they wanted Dom to just read what I wrote and do his own interpretation of what he read. So I wouldn't be influencing Dom at all. And so, okay, then the book comes out in spring of 1993. And even then I thought, yeah, maybe there'll be a couple of bookstore signings, a community event, and that'll probably be it. Well, then there's a nearly full-page review of the book in the New York Times with an illustration from the book included. And the interesting thing was that the New York Times sports columnist was the one who did the review. So after that, the book just exploded in popularity around the country. And I was invited to a lot of schools, libraries, educators' conferences and conventions. And so later on at those events for adults, they would ask me, so do you like writing children's books? I say, I do now. And I really learned to appreciate the picture book as an art form in itself. You have to write with the fewest words. It's going to be visualized by an artist. So it's like making your own movie. And I've heard, or sometimes people have told me, well, a children's book should be easier, right? Well, simple words, a simple story. And I reply, well, you try it. You try getting all the elements of the story, beginning, middle, and plot, character development in 1,000 to 1,500 words at the most. You try doing that. it's hard because 1,000 or 1,500 words, that's not much when you start doing it. So yeah, that was the beginnings of Baseball Saved Us.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That was really interesting. So I think reading the book, there's a lot of, like you were saying, there's a lot of heart that comes through. And I was wondering if you could tell us about how your family's experience and your own personal experience relate to this story told in Baseball Saved Us.
Well, my family, they were in Minidoka. As far as myself, well, every writer is going to get some aspect of himself in what he or she writes, because they're the ones writing it. So the aspects of me that got into Baseball Saved Us as well. At one time, I was the smallest kid. I didn't play Little League, but I did play organized softball teams. And then, at one time I was the smallest guy or the youngest guy around. And the infield would move in real close. So when I came with the bat, then thinking I would hit it far. So that aspect ended up in the book. And probably one of my biggest fears while I was going to school, because everybody wants to belong to a group in those days. So that was a scene also in the book. Think also of myself, what is implicit in what I wrote is that it kind of represents pretty much a lifelong search for the camp story. What is camp? As a sensei know that anytime the Nisei would meet each other for the first time, the first question would be, what camp were you in? So, I started hearing that word camp, and then I would ask my parents, and they, gave the standard one-line answers. And then it wasn't until, my final quarter in my senior year in high school, where this Nisei couple, Jack and Dorothy Yamaguchi, they had this kind of like traveling slideshow on their experience in the camp. And in this case, it was Minidoka. And that's when I first learned of the severity or the tragedy of what camp was. And so then I go to the University of Washington. Asian American movement is getting started. And then while they modeled themselves after the whole African American civil rights and Black Pride movement. So that, and was the start of Asian American studies classes. So started, finding out more. You were encouraged to find out more about your own history. And then it was after my college years that I was in the audience for a play about the camps. And then when I got to the scene where it's the whole time before they had to go to the camp, there's the whole chaos and confusion going on. And I looked at the audience, and some of the Nisei in the audience were in tears. So then it kind of dawned on me that, oh, that's why they're reluctant to talk about it. Maybe it's just too painful to talk about. And so that's, part of why I did Baseball Saved Us. And another aspect is my lifetime of being considered a foreigner in my own country. And yeah, I would, during these presentations, I would always start it off with saying, well, at schools and presentations for students, first thing I would say is, how many of you think I'm from the country of Japan? Just about all the hands go up. And I tell them, well, I've never been there. I'm from Seattle. My parents are from Seattle, born in Seattle. It was my grandparents. They're the ones from the country of Japan. First grandparent came to this country in 1905. So, but still, you know, we get that classic of, so where are you from? Oh, Seattle? No, but where are you really from? Mm-hmm. And then I also tell the students, how many of you think Japanese was my first language and English is my second? And then most of the hands will go up. No, don't know Japanese. I may know a few words here and there, and some of those Japanese words our Nisei parents told us when they got mad at us, but no, I don't know any Japanese or much of it. So I even start my presentation off that way for adults. And one time I gave that whole presentation, and then an adult approaches me afterwards and says, so Ken, when you write, do you think in Japanese first and translate that into English? And then another example is one time a school librarian was my host and for the day. And she saw multiple presentations, maybe like 3 or 4 during that day of me starting off every presentation that way, and then takes me out to a Japanese restaurant at the end of the day, and on the table are menus, one in English, one in Japanese, and she picks the one that's written in Japanese with the kanji characters, hands it to me and says, can you read this? You know, it's like, what are we supposed to do? So, yeah, that whole aspect of my life also is there in Baseball Saved Us, that, you know, we are not seen as Americans yet in our own country. Mm-hmm. So those are the parts of me that ended up in Baseball Saved Us.
Yeah, I think it's so great that this story can be told by someone with such a deep personal connection, and it really comes through in the book. And I think one of the reasons why I'm so excited to talk to you is because Baseball Saved Us was a book I grew up with, and I really loved it as a kid because it was a good story. But looking back on it too, I know it was really important for me to be able to see my own family's history reflected in the book. And so I know it was really important, whether I realized at the time or not, and formative for me. I was wondering what you hope children, both Japanese American and non-Japanese American children, get out of reading the book.
Okay, well, there's some basic themes there in the book, you know, of the power of positive thinking, turning anger into something constructive. And yeah, you can't judge a book by its cover. And that's part of the Shorty character in The Guard. And then, you know, Shorty thinks the guard doesn't like him because he just stares at him, never says anything, wearing his sunglasses. And what happens? How does it turn out? The guard was on his side all the time. So that, and also, I think, well, when the students asked me questions afterwards, you know, they asked old standards, how old are you? How much money do you make? What kind of car do you drive? Which one of them is your favorite book? But one time I was asked by a younger student, maybe second or third grade or so, and she asked, are you always going to write books about Japanese people? And I said, oh, do you mean, am I always going to write books about Americans of Japanese or Asian descent? No, not necessarily, but have you heard these stories before? And they all go, no. Well, that's why I write these stories. And but some of the more memorable questions were this one student. He was really astute. And I also read my second book, Heroes, usually in conjunction with Baseball Saved Us. Because they're like companion books. Like Heroes takes place 20 years later after Baseball Saved Us. And then in Heroes, the Sansa kid who was the bad guy when they play war, and then his father shows up, who is a Nisei veteran, in the end in his uniform. And so the student asked, so the father character in Heroes and the guard in the tower in Baseball Saved Us, they're both wearing the same U.S. Army uniform? And I said, yes. And one was serving and one was guarding maybe his family. I said, yes. He kind of went, huh? And I answered, yeah, kind of baffling, isn't it? But that's the way it went. Or, another student asked me after I read those two books, so are you going to write a book about the Japanese attack in Pearl Harbor? And he kind of said it like, where's the other side of the story? Or we got to get equal time. And I said, no, but I could write a story about a Japanese American soldier on the ground shooting at the attacking Japanese planes. And he went, huh? Well, it is fact. There were some 2,000 Nisei soldiers or Japanese American soldiers on the ground during the attack on Pearl Harbor. And while I can't conclusively prove that they were shooting at the planes, they were doing everything else every other serviceman was doing at the time. Putting fires out, tending to the wounded. And one of the most bizarre questions I was ever asked, are you a communist? And I was thinking it, I didn't say it, but for a Sansei back in our heyday, we would have said, say what? I said, well, why did you say that? And she wouldn't answer. And when was the last time we ever seen or heard the word communist, even in the adult world? So the logical answer is that she must have heard it from an adult somewhere. So that's what I hope that, say, the young readers would get out of it is, we're Americans and we have our American stories. Even when it comes to adults, well, that's been interesting. Most of the adults around the country, I found out, don't know about this subject or know very little about this subject. And one time I was asked, so were the Japanese American soldiers used mostly for labor like the African American soldiers were? And what? She had never heard of the 442nd. So I had to go and explain the whole Nisei and the military story during World War II. And teachers, well, one teacher called Baseball Saved Us revisionist. what is it revising? And I never had time to follow up. And another time, a teacher called the camps refugee camps. And again, I didn't have a chance to ask her why she said that. And I have found that it happened a few times back in the 90s where the World War II generation, they cited a number of times, Ken, have you seen this movie called 1955 movie called Bad Day at Black Rock? Spencer Tracy goes into this small town in nowhere, America. And of course, all the strangers wonder what he's doing there. And it turns out the town was hiding a secret. And that was that a Nisei veteran was lynched in that town. And for these people who ask me if I've seen the movie, they say, or they're implying that, see, that's the proof that the Japanese Americans ended up in the camps for their own protection. Mm. And, I'm like, what, you mean one Hollywood movie is supposed to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? But that seems to be the way that it goes. That we are the last popular media image. But I'll also include a positive story. One time, I've read Baseball Saved Us all the way from preschool through adults. And one time, I was invited to a bookstore in Seattle to do a presentation for a preschool class. And I thought, preschool? Well, okay. And then I was going to where I was going to do the presentation, the setup, and I ran into a couple sitting there at a table in complete cowboy regalia. The hat, the boots, sequin shirt, leather vest with the leather tassels. And then, in just my mind, I didn't say it. It's like, uh-oh. And so, but then I started talking to them and they asked me, okay, so what's your book about? And I'm kind of like, camps during World War II. And they say, oh yeah, well, we're from Colorado and we went to the Granada or Amachi campsite. And then I did my reading, and then that couple sat there and watched it, and they had to leave early before I was done getting out of there. And then the bookstore owner came up to me and said, that couple that was sitting there, they bought one of your books and they want you to sign it, and I'm going to send it to them. So that was just like Shorty in the Garden of the Tower, right? Soon didn't like them, but in the end, they were on your side the whole time. So, that was another memorable one for me, where a positive encounter. Well, most of them have been, but like I was mentioning, I've always braced myself for the camp deniers, just like the Holocaust deniers. But I have to say, I haven't ran into too many of those.
That's good. So, the last thing I wanted to ask you about, I know it's been like 30 years since Baseball Saved Us was published. Mm-hmm. Are you working on any projects right now that you want to tell us about?
Well, one is a graphic novel. It's being done through the Wing Museum in Seattle via a National Park Service grant. And this will be about the non-Japanese who helped the Japanese Americans during World War II in the Seattle area. And it's being illustrated by Kiku Hughes. And the other is a middle grade biography of Michi Nishiura Wagon. She wrote this book called Years of Infamy, and she was the first actually to find out through about 8 years of research and writing why the camps really happened. But the rest of her life was so interesting that I just had to do it. From being a farm girl in Central California to being having to go to the Higo River camp, then getting out of camp and going to college on the East Coast and rejoining her family at Seabrook Farms in New Jersey, where a lot of Japanese Americans from the camps ended up going to and working to become one of the most acclaimed costume and wardrobe designers in showbiz, and working with the top names, top celebrities at the time in the 50s, in the 60s. And then came to a point where she just dropped everything and a complete turnaround saying, I'm going to do this book. And then she went, again, about 8 years going to the National Archives, the FDR Museum in New York, and trying to put it all together. And it came out in that book, Years of Infamy, which played a very major part for redress to be achieved because of what you found. So those are two that I'm working on now. And with this whole coronavirus going on, who knows when they're going to be done.
Thanks so much, Ken. This has been a great discussion. Now we're going to go on to live audience questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So first, we have a question from Hanako Wakatsky, and she says, "Hi Ken, you mentioned an author in the 1940s who wrote on the camp that you wanted to honor. What was her name again?"
Well, I was talking about Yoshiko Uchida, the acclaimed children's book writer, Nisei. And no, she wrote her first book in the late 40s, is what I meant. Okay, and then she continued writing from that point on. And one of her most, probably, I would say it was her best book, was her memoir, Desert Exile. So yeah, that's what I was saying. Not that she was in the 40s. Her career started in the 40s.
Okay, thank you, Hanako, for that question. And then another question we have, Sean B. says, "Thank you for writing Baseball Saved Us. I gifted it to my Shin-Nisei cousin who loves to play baseball. Please tell us your thoughts on the musical based on the same book."
Oh, I love it. And especially the music done by Bruce Monroe. And it first came out, we done it. It was during 2002 that we spent like a good half a year or more developing the show, me and Bruce and the director, Bill Berry, at the time. And then finally starts playing at schools, and we test run it at schools in the beginning of 2003. Saw what worked, didn't work, and all that. Then it started to run. So it had run in 2003, 2005, 2015. And it was running at the beginning of this year until coronavirus closed it down by March, which is very unfortunate because this cast for this year was really good. And then they were having more public performances than usual. Usual per run would be maybe one or two public performances. Usually they perform at schools. Mm-hmm. And this year they're going to have quite a few, and then all gone now. So I don't know what's going to happen now. Are they going to come back later, or they have a cast, and so is the cast just going to disappear and go elsewhere? Because as actors, they have to work somewhere. And so, but Yeah, no, the show was great, and yeah, the reaction that it always gets, it's like, oh wow, really? There was a show this year for the fundraiser for Minidoka pilgrimage,
Yeah, I saw
the
that
type
one.
of
It was
festival.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that auditorium seats 400 or so, and the place was packed. And yeah, at the end, the crowd went crazy. So yeah, yeah, I love that show. I'm not saying it because I wrote it, but yeah, all the elements put together, especially the music, it is perfect. It could have easily gotten corny, but it never did. So I keep hinting around right to Fifth Avenue Theater. Hey, wouldn't this just be great with an orchestra playing that score in a full main stage production? Lasting the usual length, 2 hours or whatever it is. We'll see.
That'd be cool. Okay, another question from Nathan Nishi. Has the meaning of the book changed for you since it was first published?
I would say just in the sense of I know a lot more about the camp experience now than I did back then. And maybe I wouldn't do some things the same way. Or just in fact, in the author's note at the beginning, I used the word, and they were sent to internment camps in the middle of deserts. And then in the 25th anniversary edition that came out 2 years ago, or last year, no, 2 years ago, I was given a chance to write a new author's note. And so in it, I say that I wouldn't use the word internment today because it is technically and legally incorrect. It has always been legal to intern an alien, a non-citizen, from a country that we are at war with. But what about the other 2/3 that were in the camps who were American citizens? And they're supposed to get all the due process of law promised to all American citizens, which they never did. So what did the government do? Is that they went around the Constitution and took the whole power to do this out of the Justice Department into the hands of the military, justified military necessity, and that's how it's achieved. So what do you call the camps for them then? So it's been tossed around incarceration camps, and lately it's been concentration camps. Like some people don't like us using that term because it makes comparisons to the death camps in Europe on the other side of the world. But as I found out, even the Roosevelt administration was using concentration camps as the term. And even President Roosevelt himself was using concentration camps. So, yeah. And also I said in that author's note about how I receive mail from the students from the schools that I go to. And you remember in your earlier grades when you got those larger sheets of paper and it was blank on the top half and it had lines on the bottom half so you can draw a picture on the top and write your text on the bottom? I get a lot of those. I mean, big manila envelope. And I look through every one because I'm interested in how the students are interpreting the story. And I can say that there hasn't been a one. They would usually draw, a scene out of the book or something like that, and there hasn't been a one where I saw any of the Japanese American characters drawn with the stereotypical slits for eyes. Why? Because they're not drawn that way in the book. And so, yeah. That's maybe a song used to go during our heyday. Yeah, right on, Donnelly.
Well, thank you, Nathan, for that question. Another question. Yoko Fedorenko. She says, did anyone specific inspire the character of Shorty?
Not necessarily. He's just a Nisei boy, around 9, 10 or so. And that was pretty much it. It wasn't really a specific, person or something that was the inspiration. But interesting, Dom Lee, is that he has to like work from an actual like photograph or model. Apparently, he or can't or doesn't want to just imagine something and draw it. So he looked around his neighborhood for an Asian kid who was about the right age, dressed him up in the baseball uniform, had him hold the bat, took a photo of that, and he drew from that. So yeah, he needed inspiration from a real person.
Okay, and then another question from Yoko Fedorenko. How is writing a story for a children's book different from other types of writing you've done?
Oh yeah, well I think I was talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a whole different art form that it has to be so compact in the number of words you use, and then you have to like write with something visual in mind that the illustrator's gonna like create. So yeah, and that's in that way it's different. But the biggest difference is the the amount of words that you can use, and so that's why for me, newspaper journalism was important to become a children's book writer. Although I didn't know that at that time, because you have to make every word count. And that's where vocabulary comes in. This is what I tell the students too. You have to like say the most in the least amount of words. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like the art of children's book writing. And like I was saying, that you have to have all the elements of the story, beginning, middle, and end, plot, character development, all in like 1,000 at most, 1,000 to 1,500 words. And when you start doing that, that is not too many words.
Yeah, it sounds like a challenge. Okay.
I'll say. And I thought after baseball saved us, it would get easier. No, it just got harder.
Okay, so thank you, Yoko, for your questions. Question from Hiro Edeza. How did you approach balancing the dark topic of the incarceration while making a fun and engaging book for children?
That's a good question. I think you just had to see the story through a 9-year-old or 10-year-old's eyes. There's some things that he's not going to know what's going on. So I just, everything, what was important to him and everything, again, through his eyes. So that was pretty much, he sees things in a more simpler and maybe pure way. It's either this or this, none is adult, in the middle, gray area type of stuff. So I think that's how I approached it. And yeah, in hitting the home runs. And I would have to say that I kind of got the idea, or maybe inspiration of, you remember the 1980, I think it was 1987 World Series between the Dodgers and the Oakland A's. Classic setup, bottom of the ninth, 2 outs for the Dodgers. They have the winning run on plate, and then it's either now or never for this one game. And then this Dodgers player, Kirk Gibson, they send him up because he's a slugger, but he's hobbled, he's injured. He's not going to be able to run around the bases too well. So the only thing he can do is to hit it far enough out in the field to score that run. Full count, 3 balls, 2 strikes, and then the next pitch. It's now or never. What does he do on that pitch? He knocks it out of the park, and they win the World Series game. So I was in a grocery store checkout line, and I hear these 2 people talking behind me, and they're saying, "Did you see that game last night? That's something you dream about in Little League, huh?" And so that kind of stayed with me, and as kind of inspiration for the story.
Yeah, it was a nice ending how he got another home run.
Yeah, for a different reason. I mean, the first home run was for the team, right? So they would win. But then the second one, it was more like, you know, one home run wasn't going to matter, but he was more like he's proving something to himself in that case.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think this is our last question now. Also from Nathan Nishi. So he says, now that you've seen how the book has been received, is there anything you wish you could go back and add to Shorty's story if you could?
No, I don't think so. Although the musical version has carried it to another level, where you had Teddy, the older brother. He ends up joining the 442nd in the musical, and you have a lot more. And then in the musical version, one time we tried adding his father, this other character's father was a no boy. It had him hold different, more cynical view of what his brother Teddy did, and more about the conflict with the parents and the kids, stuff like that. So no, I don't think I would do anything differently. I guess it worked good enough as it was. So, no,
yeah, I was wondering too, how I noticed how the relationship in the musical of Shorty and Teddy was much more developed than in the book, and I was wondering if that was your idea or what the process was like for making or for developing this story.
Yeah, I think the director wanted more involvement for the Teddy character, the brother. And so, okay, you know, natural thing is that he goes off into the 442nd. So yeah, Teddy in the musical version was a lot more expanded than in the book. In the book, he just talks back to his father, and then he helps the father build the baseball field. But yeah, he was a lot more expanded in the musical version.
Okay, well, I think now we're just about ready to wrap things up. Thank you. Do you have anything else, last things you want to share?
Well, I'll just say that if somebody asked you about your American experience as somebody of Japanese descent, tell them, because you don't know where it's going to end up at. Well, cut me off if I don't have enough time. But but in 1999, I get a call from the Wing Luke Museum, and they said, well, the production team for the movie version of Snow Falling on Cedars is looking for a consultant to advise on, you know, everyday JA things before the war and during the war, like, you know, what would be on the walls of home, what would be on the table, what they wore, and so forth. And so I said, well, Nisei should do it. They're the ones that were there. They would know. A month goes by, and I get called by the same person at Wing Luke, and she says, well, can't find anybody. Nobody wants to do it. So it's like, okay, I'll do it. I guess I have to do it, because otherwise Hollywood's going to say, so we gave them a chance for the input. They're not interested. So we'll just do it. Well, they're going to do it their own way anyway. And so I went and did it, and they flew me to Vancouver, BC, where they were shooting at, and then go to this meeting room. People of the film, the director, the producer, the costume designer, the art director, they all come in for this meeting. I was like, uh-oh. Then, I get asked, the costume designer asked me, there's a wedding night scene in this movie. It takes place in Manzanar. And so then underneath the bride's kimono, would she be wearing Western style underwear? And I said, well, because all things Japanese, that's why they ended up there. But if they could afford or even obtain a wedding dress, no, it would be the same good old American wedding dress, you know, and probably the underwear would be the same. And then somebody in the costume department asked me, So when they worked on the fields here in America, did they wear that one sock thing? I said, oh, you mean a tabi? She said, yeah. I said, nah, no. They would be wearing good old American work boots like anybody else. And she said, well, that tabi thing, that's what they wear in Japan. And I was like, here you're making a movie on the very subject of not being able to differentiate between the Japanese Americans and the Japanese, and you're working on this movie. And so then, well, I had the luxury of seeing the script before they shot. And there's one scene where the husband, well, if you know the story, basically it's a love triangle between a Nisei and a Nisei woman who he's married to, and then the love interest, the white guy. And so the Nisei soldier, he's in the snowy forest of France. They invade a German camp, and he whips open the flap of the tent, and he sees a wounded German soldier there. He's really young, like early teenager. He's wounded, and so then that wounded soldier starts making a move with his hand towards something. So in the script, it says because he is a kendo expert, he easily dispatches the German soldier. So like he's a brutal killer, right? And so, which he does and kills that German soldier. So I suggested on the script, can we have a reaction shot on the Nisei soldier? It's like remorse. It's like, oh, what did I do? He was just going for a canteen and he's wounded anyway. And so I saw the final version of the film. That shot was in there. The reaction shot was in there. So nobody will ever know if it was because of that suggestion, but who knows? So that's why I say, who knows where one suggestion or one story, how far that's going to travel. I know, I was in a position most people aren't going to be in, but you never know. One more person knowing our American story is better than nothing.
Thank you. And thank you for, like you were saying, this book for me has been that I knew from a really young age I got to have a story that showed people that look like me as Americans. So thank you for writing that.
Oh yeah, that was the whole idea, and that was the whole idea with the publisher, Lee&Low Books.
And I think there's a artist. Thanks everyone for watching. I think there's an artist spotlight after this if you want to stay tuned for the live.
Okay, well, last thing. So yeah, thank you, Hannah. Thank you to Aaron's, Denise, Michelle, Johnny, and for all of you who have put this virtual pilgrimage together. What a feat you have pulled off, especially these live chats. You're uniting people from around the world. So, woo, what a job! And there's still what, six more weeks to go. Okay, I'll be watching.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Bye.